Reynald de Chatillon was arguably the Ummah's greatest enemy of the Crusade era, infamously known for his ruthless and barbaric tactics that resulted in countless of innocent lives lost. He harbored a deep-seated hatred towards Islam, which fueled his thirst for bloodshed and destruction, and even attempted an attack on Medina. Even from among the Crusaders, Reynald's actions were considered dishonorable, violating the very principles of chivalry and the norms of war. In this video, we will go through the dark timeline of the most infamous Crusader, his rise, and his actions that led to the downfall of himself and even of his own people. But first, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and make sure to leave a comment, as your engagement will help our video in the YouTube algorithm. Jazakallahu khairan. When a kingdom is plagued by inner fighting and oppressive leaders, its downfall is often inevitable. Inner fighting among nobles or rival factions weaken the state and divert resources from governance and defense. This creates a power vacuum that may be exploited by enemies or invaders. Oppressive or incompetent leaders, on the other hand, may alienate the people they rule, or even members from within their own inner circle. In the absence of strong and unified leadership, a kingdom is bound to crumble. In Islam, the significance of justice and leadership cannot be overstated. Numerous hadiths credited to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ emphasize the importance of good governance and caution against tyranny. One well-known hadith relates that a just ruler is amongst those who are safeguarded under the shade of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the day of judgment. In another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ informs us there are three whose supplication is not rejected: the fasting person when he breaks his fast, the just leader, and the supplication of the oppressed person. There is also a warning from the Prophet ﷺ to those who assist oppressive leaders in their tyranny. The Prophet ﷺ cautions, "Whoever enters upon them and condones to their lies and supports them in their oppression, then he is not from me, and I am not from him, and he shall not drink with me from the Hawd. And whoever does not enter upon them, nor help them in their oppression, nor condones their lies, then he is from me, and I am from him, and he shall drink with me at the Hawd." During the early years of the Crusade era, the Muslim Ummah was beset by inept leadership and oppressors. However, as the 12th century wore on, the Muslims were eventually led by competent leaders, while the Crusaders were handicapped by poor leadership. There are three notable leaders from amongst the Crusaders who hastened the Kingdom of Jerusalem's eventual downfall: King Guy, Count Raymond III, and Reynald de Chatillon. For now, we will concentrate on the other two leaders, Raymond and Reynald. It is crucial not to conflate the two, despite their somewhat similar names, as their personalities and mentalities were vastly opposed. Count Raymond III of Tripoli was born in 1140 Common Era as the son of Raymond II. While still a minor, he became the Count of Tripoli in 1152 Common Era and took control of the government 3 years later. In 1164 Common Era, he was taken captive by the Zengids after participating in the Crusaders' defeat to Nur ad-Din at Harim. He spent the following 10 years imprisoned before being released in 1174 Common Era. During the time in prison, he likely gained a deeper understanding of Islam and the Muslims than his peers. Ibn al-Athir wrote of Raymond, "At the time, the Franks had nobody more influential than him, none braver, and none more excellent in counsel." Nonetheless, his legacy is somewhat controversial. Many Crusaders at the time, and even Crusader apologists today, view him as a traitor. His actions played a role in the downfall of the Kingdom of Jerusalem after he obtained a position there. We will delve into his deeds later in the video, but our main focus is the other leader. The infamous Reynald de Chatillon was quite the opposite of Raymond III in terms of personality and behavior. Despite the title Prince, Reynald was not born into royalty and was originally a knight from central France. He became the Prince of Antioch in 1153 Common Era after marrying the Princess of Antioch. His credentials were questioned due to his lack of royal lineage. However, Reynald's personality discouraged most people from speaking out against him. The Patriarch of Antioch, Aimery, was one of the few who did. He disapproved of the marriage and considered Reynald unworthy of his position. When Reynald discovered this, he responded with extreme harshness. Despite Aimery's status as a respected member of the church, William of Tyre narrates the following events. Reynald was moved to violent and inexorable wrath. He laid violent hands upon the Patriarch, and with diabolic daring caused the venerable man to be seized and ignominiously conducted to the citadel, which towers high above Antioch. Then a most abominable act. He forced the aged priest, a successor of Peter, the chief of apostles, to sit in the blazing sun throughout a summer's day, his bare head smeared with honey. No one, for piety's sake, offered him any relief from the relentless rays of the sun, or tried to drive away the flies. Tyre then writes that his actions outraged the King of Jerusalem, stating, "When news of this outrage reached the King of Jerusalem, he was overwhelmed with amazement and dismay at the mad conduct of this foolish prince. Reynald therefore released the Patriarch, but not without heaping much abuse upon him." In 1156 Common Era, another incident occurred, where Reynald and an Armenian prince named Thoros launched a joint attack on the Byzantine island of Cyprus, causing extensive damage, especially to the island's monasteries, which they looted without any hesitation. William of Tyre documented this incident. Keeping in mind that the population affected was Christian, Tyre wrote the following of it. He broke into the monasteries of men and women alike, and shamefully abused nuns and tender maidens. Although the precious vestments and the amount of gold and silver which he carried off were great, yet the loss of these were regarded as nothing in comparison with the violence done to chastity. He then adds, for several days Reynald's forces continued to ravage the whole country, and since there was none to offer resistance, they showed no mercy to age or sex, neither did they recognize difference of condition. Naturally, the Byzantine Emperor was infuriated by this and warned Reynald of impending war. However, Reynald managed to appease the Emperor by sincerely pleading for forgiveness, which was a source of great humiliation for the Latins in the East. Tyre writes, he threw himself on the ground at the Emperor, where he lay prostrate till all were disgusted, and the glory of the Latins were turned into shame, for he was a man of violent impulses, both in sinning and in repenting. Let's take a moment to reflect on what was just said. It is often clear from the beginning that many of these oppressors are not well liked, even within their own community. Yet, they seem to get away with a great deal, whether due to fear of the individuals themselves or their supporters. Regardless of how impulsive or unethical their actions may be, they continue to hold power. In the case of Reynald, even before Reynald commenced his notorious activities against the Muslims, it was clear that he had been a deranged man. He had already managed to infuriate the King of Jerusalem and the Byzantine Emperor, yet astonishingly, he still retained his position of power. He was a difficult person to collaborate with, even for the Crusaders. For instance, during an incident when they were close to capturing the citadel of Shaizar, all the Christian leaders of the expedition reached a consensus on a plan, except for Reynald, who opposed it. This resulted in disruptions within the camp, and ultimately led to the cancellation of the siege. It is clear that a man like this should be nowhere near the position of leadership, yet despite his brutal actions and psychopathic tendencies, he garnered even more supporters, and few individuals had the courage to oppose him. And as a result, his influence in the kingdom continued to expand. We have coined Reynald as the Abu Jahl of his time, not solely for his cruelty, but also for his intense animosity towards Islam and its followers. His views on Muslims were considered extreme, which is often shared by the Crusaders who were not born in Levant themselves. This is documented in one of his letters that he sent back to the King of France around 1155 Common Era, which goes like this. Most excellent Lord, you have often heard of the oppression and the privations of this land, and will hear of them even more frequently if God does not prevent them. We cannot describe by word of mouth or in writing what deprivation and anxiety we have to endure. although the clemency of God has become more benign these days. Every day, the ears of all the Christians are open and hopeful to hear that we have liberated the land. In his view, Muslims were invaders and oppressors. The Levant needed liberating, as he goes on to urge the king to visit this land and liberate it from the hands of the infidels. And his hatred of the Muslims would only intensify. In 1161 Common Era, he raided the Zengid territory of Ain Tab and was subsequently captured by Nur ad-Din's soldiers and imprisoned. Prior to this, his conflicts were primarily with opposing Christians, but this changed as his animosity turned towards Islam and Muslims. While incarcerated, he learned about Muslim customs and Islam, similarly to Count Raymond III of Tripoli. But in contrast, Reynald's arrogance and narcissistic personality fueled an intense hatred towards Muslims, which he used to his advantage due to the knowledge that he now knew. Consequently, the chroniclers at the time are unanimous in singling him out as the worst of the Crusaders. Ibn Shaddad refers to Reynald as, "This accursed Reynald was a monstrous infidel and terrible oppressor." But he wasn't alone. Ibn al-Athir refers to him as one of the most devilish and recalcitrant Franks, and the most hostile to the Muslims. While Ahmad ad-Din al-Isfahani writes, he was the most perfidious and the most evil of the Franks, the most avid, the most eager to do injury and to make evil. Nur ad-Din had no intention of releasing Reynald, possibly due to the perception of his dangerous nature. Still, the Zengids would later agree to ransom Reynald in 1176 Common Era, after the death of Nur ad-Din in 1174 Common Era. As a result of Raymond's imprisonment, he also lost Antioch, since his wife had died during that period, which only intensified his hatred towards Muslims. However, he remarried Stephanie of Milly as his second wife, who was the Lady of Altry Jourdain, present-day Jordan. Over time, Reynald gained enough power in Jerusalem to become a prominent member in the kingdom's council. However, Jerusalem's council wasn't what it once was. The power of the Kingdom of Jerusalem had diminished significantly, and it is in our belief that the final strong leader was King Amalric. However, after his demise in 1174 Common Era, Jerusalem was unable to produce a worthy successor, resulting in political divisions within its council. During times of war, military strategy can be categorized as either dove or hawk. The doves, including Count Raymond of Tripoli and William of Tyre, preferred peace talks and communication to resolve conflicts. On the other hand, the hawks, consisting of the knight Guy Girard of Ridfort, who was the master of the Templars, and of course Reynald de Chatillon, favoured a more aggressive and military approach. Regarding these so-called hawks, Jonathan Phillips has written, "Both Reynald and Gerard were vigorous opponents of Islam. The former's lengthy imprisonment and attack on Medina in 1183 Common Era showed that plainly. In the case of the latter, he was the leader of an organization dedicated to the defense of the holy places against the efforts of Islam. They were also long-term supporters of Guy and opponents of Count Raymond. Regarding the knight Guy, he too supported the idea of war, but he lacked the necessary character traits and military skills despite his knighthood. Moreover, he was easily influenced by Girard and Reynald, and did not have the courage to express dissenting views. Although not immediately apparent, the clashing political aspirations and divergent perspectives of the hawks and the doves would ultimately bring about calamitous consequences for the Kingdom of Jerusalem. In part 2, we will cover Reynald's actions which provoked the wrath of the entire Ummah, along with Salah ad-Din's involvement throughout the timeline. Furthermore, it delves into Reynald's deeds that led to his downfall and the Kingdom of Jerusalem's demise. Insha'Allah, we will see you then. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.